Well, joining me is the political analyst, probably the best analyst of American politics there is, Frank Luntz, who I'm glad to say is with me here in London. And across the pond, Fox News contributor and Outkick host Tommy Lehrer. And by Michael Wolff, author of the phenomenally best-selling Fire and Fury, Inside the Trump White House. OK, well, look, great to see you all. Michael Wolff, let me start with you. You know Trump as well as anybody. You wrote the devastating series of books about him. Can he wriggle off all these hooks, I guess, is the obvious question. Could you see a pathway now for Donald Trump to just barrel his way once again to the White House?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that the answer is, of course. I mean, he has done it so many times before that it would be actually more surprising if this finally trips him up. I mean, I got a note from one of the Trump inner circle this morning that said we're in uncharted territory, which I think is true. To be found liable for sexual abuse in the middle of a presidential campaign is well, unprecedented. But will this have an effect on the campaign? It will certainly have an effect on the people who hate Trump. But the question is, will it have an effect on the people who love Trump? As so many things in the past that we thought would have an effect have not. So it is uncharted. We wait and see.
Yeah, it is. Tommy Lehrer, I want to play a clip from Chris Christie, who may well end up running against Trump to be president. He was on Fox News Radio and said this.
You know, his response yesterday to me was ridiculous, that he didn't even know the woman. I mean, you know, how many coincidences are we going to have here with Donald Trump, Brian? I mean, he must be the unluckiest SOB in the world. He just has, you know, random people he's never met before who are able to convince a jury that he sexually abused them. I mean, this guy, it's one person after another, one woman after another. The stories just continue to pile up. And I think we all know he's not unlucky, that he engaged in this kind of conduct.
All right, Tommy, give me some defense for Donald Trump here.
It's not a matter of being unlucky. It's a matter of the world wants to take this man down. I mean, every time I hear a charge against Donald Trump, some drummed up charge, I swear my head is going to explode. They go after this man over and over and over and over again over some BS, ridiculous charges. And let's also keep in mind that this jury did not find him liable for rape. They said that they did not believe this woman, that he raped her. But then again, they're going after him for defamation. I don't know about you, Piers, but if someone falsely accuses me of rape, I think that it's on and popping. You can say whatever you want about somebody who falsely accuses you of something as atrocious
Tommy,
as rape.
Hang on. They didn't just find against him for defamation. They found against him for sexual assault, right? So he was not found guilty of the higher charge of rape, but he was certainly found guilty by this jury in a civil case, it must be said. A different bar, of course, to a criminal case, but he was found guilty by a jury of sexually assaulting this woman.
Yeah, and again, the same woman that went on CNN and said that rape was sexy. Okay, I'm sorry if I have a little bit of suspicion here. And this, honestly, as a woman, really bothers me because there are people with legitimate sexual abuse and assault and rape claims that don't come forward for this exact reason. People that make a mockery of it, like this woman, E. Jean Carroll, who wants her moment in the sun and her moment in the spotlight. They go after this man relentlessly. And then meanwhile, you've got the Biden crime family over there. Amazing that we're focusing on this and not the fact that we know now that the Bidens were involved in a massive bribery pay-to-play scheme. The fact that the media continually focuses on Donald Trump and not what's actually going on with our current sitting president, to me, is an abomination.
All right, Frank Luntz, let's get to the polling on all this, because it's really interesting. Because after the indictment over the Stormy Daniels case, which I thought was overreach, frankly, it looked to me like if he made those payments, he was doing it probably to keep this quiet from his wife. And is that really the correct way to go after a president of the United States, to take him down for that? I don't think so. I think there are more important legal issues to come. But what was extraordinary was after that indictment, his poll numbers surged and so did his fundraising. It was almost like, you give us a reason to get behind this martyr and we're going to do it. Will that happen again now after this, do you think?
And you've got the exact word, martyr. I like to call it, it's not even victimization. It's now persecution. And Donald Trump is the perfect political person who understands communication and has united all these Republicans against those who are attacking them. And the Fox News host, she did it right there. But I want to bring it down a little bit because I know what you think about America, as do I. There's a reason why I'm here. We're destroying our democracy. We actually are. More Americans think our institutions have failed. More Americans believe our elections are fraudulent. More Americans believe democracy does not work. More Americans have lost faith and confidence in the future. And most importantly, more Americans today than ever before think their kids are going to be worse off than they are. Piers, we're destroying this gift that we were given. It's not entertainment for me. It's not being a pundit for me. I'm watching my country while I'm alive. I'm watching my country tear itself apart. And the problem is that Donald Trump is leading that effort. It's not about the truth to him. And by the way, elections are less important than the future of our democracy.
Right.
Obviously, we have trouble here in Great Britain. But America's become the laughingstock.
I mean, Michael Wolff, I have to say, a lot of the world is shaking their head, going, you've got 320 million people in America, and you have potentially a runoff again between two people, one of whom will be 82 if he wins the election, 86 by the end, who is already showing visible signs of senility. And the other one is already under criminal indictment, has just been found guilty by a civil jury of sexual assault, has a number of other legal threats coming down the line. A lot of people away from America scratching their heads going, how is it that it's going to be these two facing off to become the most powerful person in the world?
Well, I hope you're not asking me to answer that question because I have no idea. I mean, it is kind of astounding. I mean, somebody was saying to me the other day, well, we always love a rematch. So is that part of this that we are seeing, and we now regard all of this as an incredible show, that these are all characters engaged in some kind of, I don't know, media event. And who is responsible for that? Well, Fox certainly has responsibility in that. All other cable channels have responsibility for that.
But right now we have a debt ceiling that we cannot solve.
Right.
We have a budgetary crisis. We have a crisis in terms of our relationship with China. All of this is having a negative impact on actually getting things done.
Well, I think you have a paralyzed Washington in the sense that the first thought now for any side that loses an election is how to spend the next 4 years preventing whoever wins from doing anything. And this has been going on now for a long time. And I look at it and think, I'm not sure how you solve that problem.
So you're correct. You're so correct. But then the question is, what does the media do in this process? Or are they playing, as Michael Wolff says, are they playing characters in this Broadway play?
Well, take CNN tonight are going to be doing this big town hall. Caitlin Collins, one of their correspondents, will be interviewing Donald Trump in front of a lot of Republican voters, apparently. Big departure for CNN, who were full on Trump bashing for a number of years. But, again, you can already see a huge furore erupting about them even doing this. But Trump is a bona fide candidate to be president. Why shouldn't CNN do it? But already I can see this is going to play out in a horrendously toxic way, whatever happens.
But some of this is our fault as voters, our fault as citizens. We seek news that affirms us rather than informs us. We just want to be confirmed. We surround ourselves with people who agree with us. You can't even have a political conversation at Thanksgiving or Christmas without it erupting. So the problem is, and by the way, I'm going to blame social media more than any other factor.
No question.
It's a poison. And it's time for Facebook and Google and all those companies to sit down and acknowledge the damage that's already happened and address it.
Let me bring Tommy in. I mean, Tommy, the big question for me, for the Republicans, is I felt for a while the only way Joe Biden might be able to win in 2024 is if Donald Trump is his opponent again, because he's beaten him once. He knows he'll get the anti-Trump vote out. Trump has probably got the power to win the nomination for the party, but I'm not sure he can win enough independents, for example, to become president. Why would the Republicans willfully engage in an act of self-harm when you've got, for example, a candidate like Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, who's been very successful? He's nearly half Trump's age. He hasn't got any of the baggage. I don't really get the strategy here.
Well, you know, Piers, I'm
sorry,
not sure
Michael, that was just
true.
Michael, that was for Tommy. I'll come to you for a response to Tommy. But Tommy, that one was for you. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Tommy, can you hear me? I don't think she can.
That's the Who song.
We're going to fix Tommy's ear because I don't think she can hear me. Michael, you answer then.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think what you point out is the weakness of the situation to suddenly posit Ron DeSantis, and that's the only person that the Republicans and the media establishment have been able to posit. Oh, Ron DeSantis can run against him and do well. But everything that we've seen, except in the local Florida election, Ron DeSantis is an incredibly untried and weak candidate. He's actually a bad retail politician, which is and against Donald Trump, one of the greatest retail politicians of all time.
That is true.
It's
the only
no
caveat,
contest.
yeah, the only caveat I would put in that is that if you looked at the recent midterms, most of Trump's endorsements lost or did badly. And DeSantis was the standout Republican winner, taking a majority of 30-odd thousand to 1.5 million. I mean, he has got the scores on the board.
Well, in Florida, but we've seen again and again and again and again in the history of presidential races, governors who can't step out of their own state. It's an entirely different skill set to deal with national media over local media and local media and local political organizations.
Yeah, that is true. Let me bring in Tommy. I was going to ask you about DeSantis, Tommy, but your ear fell out. So we've got your ear back. So I want to ask you about somebody else. George Santos strikes me as the only person where Donald Trump looks at him and goes, wow, now that guy, that is shameless. I interviewed him in New York recently, and we had this exchange. I've been a terrible liar. I mean, would you be prepared to say that?
Sure. Like I said, well, I've been a terrible liar on those subjects.
I've been a terrible liar, said George Santos. Well, he's now been arrested for being a terrible liar, and he's had, I think, 13 charges for his lies. But he says tonight, I'm not going to resign. He intends to return to Congress to vote tomorrow and intends to run for re-election. How is America, again, I ask you as a nation, you're speaking for your country here, how can someone like George Santos, who literally lies about whether the sky is blue, how can he still be operating in Congress?
Well, again, because I am a conservative and a Republican, I don't stand up for people just because they are a conservative or Republican. So I'm not going to stand up for George Santos. I'm not going to defend him, right? I think we can do much better as a Republican Party, as conservatives. But I do find it incredibly interesting, Piers, that the rest of the mainstream media chose to run with the George Santos story today, which impacts very few people when you really look at it, instead of running with James Comer and House oversight over the Biden crime family, which I've been trying to address, because we could have potentially the then vice president, current president, taking money from foreign entities like China in the millions of dollars over a span of several years. But yet we're talking about George Santos. I'm not defending the man, but my God, you've got a man sitting in the White House who has not been held accountable for what his family has done, what his son has done. I really wish someone would talk about that. That has implications for our entirety of our national security.
Right, and certainly, Frank, I was just finally, I mean, that there is a double standard about the way Biden is treated by the media, because a lot of the media do skew to the left. And I do think if it was the Trump family that had this kind of murky stuff going on with all these payments coming into the family from all these foreign adversaries in many cases, there would be, all hell would be breaking loose.
So I go back to your original point. Is this the best we can do? And that the ad that's going to kill Donald Trump in the end is going to be a middle-aged woman looking at her daughter who's turning 18 and asking her, is this the person you're proud of? Is this the person you find as a role model? Is this the best person we can put up for president of the United States? It's going to be asked as a question. This is not about entertainment. And my concern in this whole conversation is that we're trying to score political points. And I mean this. You know me. This is not about political points. At some point, you break your democracy. At some point, the public loses.
Well, I do
faith.
think your point about social media, I do think it's got so tribal on social media. Facts no longer matter. All that matters is getting on your tribe's side and agreeing with whatever the tribe has decided is the agreed line. And facts are getting disintegrated. I've got to leave it there. I could talk about this all day long, and it's great to have you here, Frank. Please come back soon. Michael, thank you very much over there across the pond, and thank you, Tommy. It's going to be fascinating to watch how this all plays out. But again, I asked the question I asked at the start. Really, America? This is the best you can do? Come on. What's your take been on, I was with you on the night, of course, and that was a very sad evening indeed. As we've moved on now, we're beginning to look ahead as well as recognise the enormous contribution this late Queen made. As we look ahead to King Charles III, are you as encouraged as I am, and I think Arthur is, by the start he's made?
Completely, Piers. It's as though he's grown a foot taller in strength, in confidence, and I think he's drawing strength and reassurance from his subjects, and actually we, his subjects, are also drawing comfort and reassurance from his strength and for how he's conducting himself, for the way that this is just seamlessly transitioning from the late Queen, from all of her extraordinary achievements. But actually, I really do think this is going to give the whole nation real confidence. I draw huge strength from it, much more than I think any of us could possibly have expected.
Ava, do you see yourself as a subject? Do people your age even like the idea of being anyone's subject? And is that an issue for the future of the monarchy?
I think it's a difficult question at the moment in this 10-day period of mourning because, I mean, look, it's a subject steeped in history, which I think is fascinating, and I think that a lot of people can have massive appreciation for. But, you know, I don't think that we also need to feel as subjects. I think it's perfectly okay to be quite sad about the Queen and to appreciate her legacy, but also say, do you know, there's quite a few things around the monarchy that I don't really appreciate. And
like what in your case?
Well, today, for example, I didn't really appreciate police officers using the 2022 police bill to drag protesters off the streets and say that we weren't allowed to object to the monarchy.
No, I mean, I didn't
appreciate
I didn't like what they were saying, but I absolutely defend their right to protest.
Correct.
And there are a body of people in this country who will agree with some of these protests. Let's take a look at some of the protests today.
Disgusting! Wait, I've done nothing wrong.
Now, you see, it's interesting, that particular incident, because I think it's completely disrespectful to have done that anywhere near the Queen's hearse, obviously. However, I also thought it was a big risk by the royal family to let Prince Andrew, after all that's gone on with him in the last year, walk through the streets in that way. Now, they would say, and I understand this, he was a beloved son of the Queen, and she would famously described him to people sometimes apparently as her favoured son. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but that was what was reported. But notwithstanding that, it's only a few months ago that he paid off a woman who'd accused him of sexually abusing her millions and millions of dollars, having said he'd go to court and clear his name. Is it irrational for some people to think this is completely inappropriate?
Well, I mean, he didn't pay. Let's be clear about that. We paid. We, the taxpayer, paid that. And, you know, I would say that it was disrespectful to her and her legacy, and actually to the people who love the Queen, for him to walk behind the carriage. I thought that was really disrespectful, actually. You know, I think it's really...
I'm sorry. He is a grieving son for his mother. I think it's mean-spirited. I think it's heartless. Frankly, you know, we, a nation, are grieving. but they are a family.
Yep.
A family in grief.
But
I think his siblings would have wanted him there.
Okay, but in any
He would have
other
wanted him there.
situation, would a family walk through the entire nation to pay their respects? So they don't need to be there for the entire funeral.
This
You
is
could sit
the
back
royal
for a
family.
moment.
This is, and yes, but that I think is a sign of the openness and the transparency with which Charles
If we're
is going
going
to
to be
govern
open and
in the
transparent,
future.
we could talk about the fact that a lot of people have had to cancel the funerals for their own mothers because of the Queen and in respect and homage to the Queen. And there are a lot of people at the moment who are actually having to rent coffins because they can't afford to buy them. So if we're going to talk about respect, we should talk about it across the board, and we should have a little bit of nuance.
Well, I think that actually it's about people's love and appreciation and devotion to our monarch,
the Queen.
to the Queen,
Arthur,
the late Queen,
Arthur,
for
what's
70 years.
What is your view of this Andrew situation?
Well, I
because
like Andrew.
I mean, I didn't like, for example, that he wore his military uniform for the vigil. Apparently, it's the only part of the entire week where he'll wear a military uniform. But if you're in one of the regiments that he did represent, I know there's a lot of ill feeling towards him from members of those regiments, that he still seems like he's representing them after what he did. Now, what do you think?
Well, look, I was there in Portsmouth when he came back after the Falklands War, and we were cheering him, and we laid his life on the line for this country. I've worked with him for years, and I really like him. And he's made a big mistake in his life, which was giving that interview to Emily Maitlis. I don't care what you say. I mean, if he'd have said to her, "I did do that. I was lonely. It was a mistake, and I apologise," it would have none of this trouble. But the fact that he lied was the mistake. Now,
Well, hang on, Arthur. That may not be the only.
Well,
hang on. I just want to finish, Piers.
Yeah, but my point is that may not be the only mistake he made. I mean, let's be clear. He paid a woman to avoid having his supposed day in court. He paid her millions of dollars. It may be that he was guilty of what she accused him of. Otherwise, why are you paying someone millions of dollars? We don't know that, and we're never going to find out now. But it may not have been his only mistake to do that interview.
Well, OK, fine. All right. But it was highlighted he made a mistake in his life. We've all made mistakes in our life. We'd hate to be highlighted. Every one of us. You, me, this young
I've
lady
never
there.
ever had to pay 12
We haven't
No,
all
but you
paid
wouldn't have to
millions
do
of
that
dollars
because you're
to
not a
someone.
prince of the realm. That's
Potential
why.
mistake.
And the fact is that, you know, I think he should be walking behind his mother's
Do you?
coffin. I think he should. Of course I do. I mean, he's grieving. He's broken-hearted.
Should people who are angry about it be treated in the way that protester
I don't
was?
think people should be allowed to sort of disrupt that comment with the Queen.
Sorry, I thought you were going to go on the other side of it.
No, I don't.
But you-
No. I agree with Piers. You have the right to say it, but there are times when you don't do it. And
Well, I think it's wrong. I think it's inappropriate
It's
to do it in the way they
inappropriate,
did it.
yeah. Yeah, that's
but I
right.
don't think they should start being hauled away, manhandled, or arrested.
Arrested
as some
is
of them
really
have been.
frightening.
I mean, are we really living in a country where people get arrested for exercising their right to free speech to protest
Well, I
about a
saw
monarchy,
that.
for
I
example?
saw
And
that
that's,
tonight.
it's a fine balance judgment. But look, the reality is, you know, this is a democracy. And in a sense, I think they've got the right to grieve as a family. It's not Prince Andrew's choice. You know, he's got a right to grieve with his
You
family.
can't argue that they fought for our freedom, or
And
our
he fought for his
democracy has
country a
fought
long
for our
time ago.
freedom. You can't argue that he fought for our freedom, and then when someone says something you don't particularly like, arrest them.
Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Controversial influencer Andrew Tate's uncensored return last night. It's been viewed over 1 million times so far on YouTube alone. His fans call him a misunderstood maestro of masculinity. His critics say he's a malignant, malicious misogynist. I think he's probably somewhere between the two, but last night, once again, he divided opinion.
I do mean what I say. If I were to see a girl on a private plane on Instagram, for example, I would assume that a man put her on that private plane. I would not assume she bought it herself.
What if it was...
Perhaps that makes me misogynistic.
What about the Afghan women?
There's nothing to do with me on any level.
You don't have a view?
I have a view. My view is that people naturally gravitate towards law and order, and if you didn't have the Taliban, you'd have different warlords operating in lawlessness, and there would be no way to prevent your store or your market stall getting completely robbed by someone with an AK-47, and people are going to gravitate towards a form of law and order. America left. They left a power vacuum, and the power vacuum is now full.
What about their treatment of women? I mean, only tonight they have banned any women from going to university.
Fantastic. Let's get the feminists to go and teach them a lesson. The feminists are so tough, and they stand up and say they can do anything a man can do. Let's arm them up and send them to Afghanistan. I'm sure they'll fix it.
Why can't you just say on that, you know what, it's completely wrong?
Because it's not my point. I don't understand.
But it makes me think. It'll make your critics think that you don't think it's wrong.
They could ban all men. They could ban all short people.
But they're not. They're only banning women.
Correct. They could ban all short people. They could ban all people with long hair. And none of it's anything to do with me. So they can do whatever they want. I'm not going to go to war with the Taliban.
Do you think you're a misogynist?
Absolutely not. I'm not a misogynist on any level. This is one of those buzzwords they just throw at people randomly. Homophobic, racist, misogynist. They just throw it out at people.
Well, joining me now is Talk TV contributor Esther Krakow and a trembling broadcaster and journalist, Jenny Kleeman, visibly recoiling in horror. Let's start with you, Jenny. He's not your idea of a role model.
Well, no, he's not. I see him as a symptom of a problem rather than a solution to it. I can understand why.
What's the problem that he's the symptom
for?
The
problem is that I think a lot of young men feel that nobody is speaking up for them. In a culture where we are encouraged to have identity politics, the only identity that isn't a good identity is a young man or a young white male. He talks in a very straight way and he gives straight answers to some questions, which I think he gives very wrong answers to. But I find him repellent. I think he talks about... He basically creates straw men that he destroys. So he will depict feminism as a particular kind of thing, a kind of man-hating thing, which it isn't.
Well, it is to some feminists.
For a small number of feminists.
I mean, there are some radical feminists who genuinely hate men.
There definitely are. There definitely are. But most people know that feminism is about just thinking that everyone should have equal opportunities regardless of...
Yeah, and one thing we know from Afghanistan, and these heartbreaking scenes today in Afghanistan of weeping female students who couldn't go to university, and men actually in Afghanistan then going out in protest for them. I mean, really heart-rending scenes, Esther, here of these young women in Afghanistan weeping because they've been told they cannot now continue their education. And then you've got male students walking out in protest. Very brave thing to do. A bit like we saw in Iran with the men protesting in support of the women being oppressed there. This is where he slightly lost me last night, Andrew Tate. There are a lot of things he says which I understand why young men, you feel a bit lost, why they gravitate to his confidence. He's very good at building business. He's proven it. He's made himself extremely rich doing it. A lot of what he says about masculinity and stuff, I completely would sign up to, actually. Yeah. And his confidence can help people. But when he was not prepared to condemn the
10th century
Taliban
barbarians
for that, because that to me is an open and shut case. If you don't condemn it, then I'm afraid you've got a problem. And it's not about sending feminists in to go to war. As I pointed out to him.
Which I actually do think is a valid point.
Well, it's fine, but a lot of women do actually fight in the armed forces.
Yes,
so the idea that none of them do is also nonsense.
I think he was using that to kind of attack the more extreme forms of feminism that says, women can do anything a man can do. And he was using that as an example. Yeah. But I do think, you lose people when you refuse to outright condemn sort of 10th century barbarians like this. But I don't think... When he said it has nothing to do with him, I think he's not willing to get into dicey territory in that way. But it's like you speak in such absolute terms. Why
Do you think
not?
he's a misogynist?
I don't think he's a misogynist. No, I don't think so.
I mean, misogynist means somebody who hates women.
Yeah,
I don't think he hates women.
I do think he hates women. I think he thinks women are nothing. I think he would not know what to do with you and I, Esther, because he does not know how to deal. He gives interviews to people like you or to Hugo Rifkin. He'll give interviews to men.
But a lot of women I've spoken to about... Yeah, but a lot of women...
But he's done interviews with women. I've seen them before on YouTube. And he's very polite and respectful.
Yeah, women do. A lot of women do like him.
Exactly.
There are a lot of women who don't know him who seem to hate him, ironically. But I'm not sure it's as clear-cut as he's a misogynist.
I don't think he's a misogynist, and I have a brother who's probably within his target demographic, 23, and I can understand why his message would resonate with him, because it's normal. It's normal, exactly, for young men to feel like they don't have a place in Western society, and he actually makes that point. I just think when you don't want to outright condemn 10th century barbarians like the Taliban, you tend to lose your case with more moderate people. But again, we're not his target audience.
The fact that his understanding about what's happening in Afghanistan is that it's a feminist issue rather than a human issue.
I don't think he said that.
Well, no, he did. He said, send this feminists in. It's a human issue where we made all these promises to people in Afghanistan and then we left.
Well, let's be clear. We betrayed those women.
We absolutely betrayed Biden.
Joe
As a human
Biden,
being,
in the way we pulled out of Afghanistan overnight, and we betrayed not only people who work with us, the interpreters and so on,
but people
we
who
have left
died
millions,
for them.
millions of Afghan women have just been tossed back to these barbaric
and
walls.
servicemen who died for it. But the fact that he sees it, he says, "Oh, it's got nothing to do with me." As a human being, it should have something to do with it. As someone who says he's a
No,
proud
I agree.
Brit, it should
I
have
thought it was a
something to do
cop out there, but albeit, again, a lot of what he says, I could imagine if I was a young man, it would resonate with me, probably for the right reasons. I think he's trying to give people confidence and a belief that being masculine is not actually a stick to beat you with, right? You can be a good masculine person. He used to be applauded. Let's talk of somebody who I don't think is a shining example of this, Joe Lycett, who has spent the last month posturing away with his shiny moral halo about David Beckham being in Qatar and representing the Qataris in the World Cup and being paid for it. And then The Sun revealed yesterday a rather uncomfortable truth, which is that he had actually performed himself in Qatar, Abu Dhabi and Dubai in 2015, a series of stand-up gigs for money, Esther. Now, there's a word for this, and I call it hypocrisy.
Well, this is the thing. It's hypocrisy and it's cowardice, because he would say these things, but he wouldn't actually go to Qatar and sit on Qatari state television and say all these things. He can sit back comfortably and rage at their...
But his whole point was David Beckham shouldn't be there and shouldn't be fronting anything for the Qataris when this guy himself has taken it. And his excuse was so mealy-mouthed, Jenny. Oops, I've been caught by The Sun. Well, yes, I did 2 gigs in Doha. Actually, it was 3 gigs in Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Qatar. I kept it secret by writing about it in my own book. Well, no one remembers that from 7 years ago. I was paid a few £100, not keen to say exactly how much, not by Qatar, but by UK comedy promoters who were being paid by Qatar. But it was 2015, when Qatar's laws were exactly the same about homosexuality as they are today, and that went a lot further back then. And so he goes on, and then he says, oh, no, but who should I take moral lectures from? Not from The Sun. OK, what aboutery? It's not about The Sun here. It's about Joe Lycett's hypocrisy.
I think it doesn't look good for Joe Lycett, but I would say that they're different things. The World Cup is about giving soft power on the global stage.
So is stand-up comedians who are... Well, hang on.
He was like nothing in 2015.
So are gay comedians going to a country which they profess to hate because it bans homosexuality. They're by going there, they are basically saying, I don't care. I'm pocketing the money. It's the same argument he used against Beckham.
I think with Beckham, it's to do with being an ambassador on the global stage for a country that is trying to elevate their profile. Joe Lycett in 2015,
if I said to you, it's the old thing of Churchill. Was it Churchill and Bessie Braddock when he said he was drunk one night? He said, "Madam, would you sleep with me for £1 million?" And she said, "Would you sleep with me for £1 million?" And she went, "Well, I don't know, Winston." And he said, "Well, would you sleep with me for £1?" No, don't be outrageous. Well, look, we already established. He says, what kind of woman do you think I am? We know what kind of woman you are. We're haggling over the price, right? No, it was a joke. But my point about Joe Lycett is he seems to be saying, I only take a few hundred. No, Beckham took a few million. What's the difference?
I think you have to be careful about doing this kind of archaeology about what people have done really quite far in the past.
No, it was 7 years ago when it was illegal to be gay in Qatar.
It's been illegal to be gay there.
He knew that. Illegal to be gay in Dubai, and it was illegal to be gay in the UAE.
Once you sanction this kind of stuff, it's fair game for anybody. Like all of those sports people who wear it, it's established that when they were 18, 10 years ago,
no,
this stuff
not buying it.
Yeah.
Rank hypocrite. No. Don't want to see any more Joe Lycett's moral halo, thanks. Thank you, Pat. Well, joining me now is socialite and Prince Andrew's former girlfriend, Lady Victoria Harvey, author and historian Dr. Tessa Dunlop, and my son's former royal editor, Duncan Larkham, and from America, a lawyer to 20 of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, Gloria Allred. Well, welcome to all of you, a stellar panel. Gloria Allred, well, first of all, lovely to talk to you, and a belated Happy New Year to you, Gloria. Your reaction when you heard that Ghislaine Maxwell had given this extraordinary interview from behind bars, and I suppose more pertinently to the content of that interview?
Well, I think that she obviously was trying to be helpful to her former friend or acquaintance, Prince Andrew, and that was part of her intent. I can't read her mind. I don't know what her motive was in saying it. Maybe it's because that's what she believes to be true. But it has stirred up quite a storm. But at some point, we should talk about whether there really is going to be a trial, because I have done many, many settlements with his attorney, not about this case, although you're correct, I did represent 20 victims of Jeffrey Epstein, some of whom had accusations against Ms. Maxwell. But there was a settlement, and his attorney, Andrew Brettler, is very, very good. And for him to say that Prince Andrew, or to have it suggested as a rumor that he is going to file a lawsuit that somehow he was pressured by his mother into the settlement, that, you know, as they say in the South, in some parts of the United States, that dog won't hunt, because that's not a reason to overturn a settlement. And further, likely, although I haven't seen the settlement, most settlements, or in fact all of them that I've ever done with Andrew Brettler, his attorney, have always included an arbitration clause, which means that he can't just go right to trial, even if he would want to. If in fact he did file the lawsuit, Virginia could make a motion to compel arbitration, because there's always been arbitration clauses. And that would mean it's likely that the court, if it's a court in New York, would compel arbitration, and so there would not be a public trial. At best, there would be an arbitration.
Okay, but Gloria, on the central point of the credibility of his accuser, there's no doubt that the settlement of the case with Alan Dershowitz, in which she admitted that she'd had memory mistakes and so on, that was a serious dent to her credibility. If you were representing Prince Andrew, wouldn't you think that actually, if the main accuser here, who received this huge amount of money, if this other case has basically collapsed on an issue of her credibility, would it not be worth at least trying to go again?
Well, that case ended up in a settlement, not in a verdict. And the argument also could be, and of course I wouldn't represent Prince Andrew, but the argument for a plaintiff would be that, that maybe she had a memory lapse about one person and one set of events. That doesn't mean she had a memory lapse about other events.
Right, but it would be
one last thing, which is
right. But but Gloria,
you're
a very smart lawyer, razor smart, I would say, one of the finest legal minds I know. If you had a situation like this and you were up against it on the other side, wouldn't you think that if her credibility was now seriously in question, if her memory was proven to be completely wrong in another allegation of a similar kind, would you not think that that might open the door again?
Perhaps, but I think it's unlikely. In order for Prince Andrew to have an actual trial, or, even in an arbitration, he would have to prove some kind of fraud at the time. And not only that there was a fraud, that that Virginia was part of this fraud. That's a very high bar of evidence. That's very difficult for him to prove, and I don't know that he's ever going to prove it.
Okay. Interesting stuff. Let me come to Tessa on this. Look, I have a view that the moment Andrew paid that cheque, it was game over in this case. He can't revisit this. He said, I'm going to take it all the way. I'm going to clear my name. Then he just caved and paid a massive amount of money, millions. We're not exactly sure how many. You read between 3 and 10 million. It's, take your choice. But it was millions and millions of dollars to a woman he claims he never met, which never had any credibility, as far as I'm concerned. Why would you pay someone you never met millions of dollars in a sex abuse case? So you put it all together and you think that. But, and it's an important but, if his main accuser, the woman he's paid all this money to, has got now serious credibility issues, why shouldn't Andrew re-enter the legal fray?
It's an entirely separate case. This is absolutely classic. People going out of their way to discredit the victim of sex abuse crimes.
Well, hang on.
These girls generally girls.
Hang on, just look, to play devil's advocate, people aren't going out of their way to do it. She was discredited in her allegations against Alan Dershowitz. He won that case. Right, but if an accuser admits that she actually lied about that man and told very serious allegations about which turned out not to be true, that's different, isn't it?
I think it's really important to remember that these girls come from chaotic backgrounds, which is one of the reasons why it's so hard to make a case stick, which is why we all have to remember when we've been listening to what Ghislaine Maxwell's been saying. This is a woman who was called out by the judge. She was called out.
You've got notes because you don't know anything about this case.
I do know quite a lot about talking truth to power. I'm sitting here on an NDA, so I understand what it's like.
You don't know about
as a
Virginia
woman.
Guffrey.
I can tell you quite a lot. She was called out by the judge.
Have you read
Judge
her book?
Nathan.
Have you read
Judge
her book?
Nathan.
Have you read her book, which is a
No.
made-up book? There you go.
I have not.
She talks in that book about taking so many sleeping pills and so many drugs the weekend at Kinnerton Street that her memory was very hazy. She writes that with her own hand.
Let's recall that Ghislaine Maxwell, heinous and predatory is what the judge called her. And she went out of her, one second, she went out of her way to give Ghislaine a 20-year sentence that was beyond the maximum guideline. That is how appalling it was. It was extraordinary to get all those women talking truth to power in that way. So don't let's just finally miscredit. Miscredit Goofy and her bravery. I'm going to be. Let's just be honest. Let's liar. I just want to finally remind you what Andrew signed his name to.
Okay. I just want to. Sorry for the bad language that was used. And only for that. Victoria, here's the bottom line with this. I don't believe Ghislaine Maxwell at all. Right? I think she was up to her neck in it with Epstein. I think she was guilty as she was found guilty. And I find this revisionist bleating she's now doing is all self-centered to try and get herself off the rap. The more interesting question for me is Andrew, because he remains...
He was made to settle. He didn't want to settle.
But he's a grown man. Who makes him settle?
The Queen, because he's an honourable person.
He didn't have to settle.
He did. Were you there in the room? I mean, I wasn't there, but I was told that the Queen and Buckingham Palace, basically, he was forced to settle. He had no choice.
I mean, look, let's bring in Duncan here, because...
And they literally just fed him to the wolves.
OK.
Right
hang on, Tessa. I want to bring in Duncan. From a journalistic point of view, if we were pursuing this as an investigation, and you had a woman who made allegations against two high-profile people, and one was a top lawyer, right? Alan Dershowitz is not any old lawyer. This is a guy who represented John Lennon and got him from being deported, right? This is a famous guy in America.
Totally different.
And here's my point. And she makes allegations of a similar nature against him as she did against Prince Andrew. And she's now had to drop that lawsuit, admitting she may have made a mistake in identifying him as one of her past abusers. We know, as journalists, our natural instinct would be to then be very sceptical about anything else that she was saying, right?
Well, yes, but I mean, apart from the fact that this is a case that's gone on for years.
But just pretend it's not her. Just pretend it's like a person has just done this and has openly lied. And then, so what would you think about the case with another person? Do you think she's being truthful?
Well, either lied or she made a terrible mistake based on
just had a very
issues in her life.
creative imagination and saw the
whatever the
colour
reason, Tessa, wait a minute. Whatever the reason, she got it wrong, badly wrong, and seriously defamed Alan Dershowitz in the process. And he fought it all the way, and that lawsuit's now been dropped. And that is the same woman who's accused Prince Andrew.
There are all kinds of things that, had it gone to court, that would have probably needed light shed on them and might not have stood up to any kind of testament at the time. The picture and the authenticity of it obviously being one of those points. But also about the involvement in newspapers more than a decade ago, when the story was being effectively sold to the tabloid papers, which I was part of at the time. And so that would be, in Britain, certainly, that would put a big question mark over any potential victim. But I don't think any of it matters if you take a step back. It doesn't actually matter what on earth Andrew's thinking if he is seriously contemplating reopening this. He's already been found guilty in the court of public opinion. And his appearance on the BBC with Emily Maitlis has just demonstrated...
Well, that was a total disaster.
well, that was a complete setup.
But hang on,
he set that up.
I can't even tell you what is really behind this, because you wouldn't even understand. But
it wasn't a setup. I mean, Newsnight went to him. He agreed to do an interview,
and he thought he did well.
He basically exposed himself hideously over an hour-long toe-curling encounter with a very smart journalist. Here's my problem with Andrew about all this, right? I remember when the pictures appeared on the front page of the News of the World of him walking with Epstein through a park, Central Park in New York. It wasn't like he just met him in the park. He spent 4 days with the guy at his Manhattan townhouse.
We don't
Here
know
are the
how many
pictures.
days
4 days, and they were all partying right? Lots of women seen coming and going in that time. This is after Epstein had admitted abusing a 14-year-old. After he was a convicted paedophile. So here's my question.
Yeah.
Is that you can get round... I mean, everything else can be murky.
Right.
What I can't get my head round is Andrew, son of the Queen, flies to New York for a 4-day jolly.
Do we know for sure it was 4 days?
We do.
Though?
It was 4 days.
No.
4-day jolly with a guy who was a convicted paedophile.
Yeah.
Now, that alone, to me, should disqualify him from public life, right?
I mean,
you can't be, a senior member of the royal family and consort with convicted paedophiles willingly for 4 days.
Yeah, but, you know, we have to remember it wasn't such a big story back then.
But it doesn't change the facts of what he did.
The second time
it doesn't change the facts of what he did.
When it happened the first time, I almost didn't even believe it when I first read it, because it was kind of like...
That's classic.
It wasn't on the front pages back then.
But Victoria, what you've said there is absolutely a classic case. People don't believe it when establishment figures do the unbelievable.
But what I'm saying is, you don't know about Virginia. Like, I've followed this day and night.
Victoria, could I just tell you what Andrew signed his name to?
Can I?
No. What I've got here are notes from the case that he put his name to. Let me tell you, Andrew accepted. When he signed last year, he accepted that Virginia had suffered as an established victim of abuse.
To anything
and as a result of public attacks. He accepted that publicly. So are you now saying Andrew's a liar? Because to rescind on that, he's a liar.
He's never admitted anything,
but
any wrongdoing.
He accepts she was the victim of abuse, of sex abuse.
Say that.
Oh, so now you're saying he's a liar. So
you know, the irony, Victoria, is if Andrew had not settled, if he had taken it to court, then actually, given the timeline of this other case collapsing, it could have been a situation where the credibility of his main accuser had been brought into serious question before they even got into court. In which case, the whole case may have been dropped anyway.
What happened with Alan Dershowitz? I've been in communication with him, I don't know, maybe a year or so, and Virginia kept delaying. Her lawyers kept delaying and delaying and delaying, and his health wasn't good. You know, he was really suffering. And so if you're innocent, why would you keep delaying a deposition, right?
All right. Well, joining me now is the author and playwright Bonnie Greer, Talk TV contributor and lawyer Paula Rowan Adrian, and the podcast host from across the pond, Hotep Jesus. Well, welcome to all of you. All right, Paula. Let's start with you, because I know what you're about to say is going to make me infuriated and it's going to be utterly insufferable.
Excellent.
These are two crests that carry images of sailboats.
Yes.
It's got nothing to do with slavery or racism.
If that's your opinion, then you're entitled to have it.
It's a fact.
Well, you don't know that, Piers, and the historians are being asked to look into that. And that's what should properly happen, shouldn't it? Because when you tell us about history and how important history is, what we want to do is to ensure that we have got this right and we are going to grow from this experience.
Yeah, I'm not growing from it.
We're not going to deny it.
I am growing from this experience. I'm growing very annoyed.
And I'll
tell you why.
Why are we annoyed?
Let me tell you why.
Why are we weary when we talk about slavery?
No, I'm not worried about that. I thought slavery...
tired when we talk about World War I or World War II.
Like everybody I know, I thought slavery was disgusting, and I'm very, very glad that everyone came round to their senses it was disgusting and that Britain actually led the way in ending the damn thing. Of course I do. Slavery was disgusting. However, it turns out the historians say Manchester didn't adopt ships as an emblem until 1842.
Apparently
35 years after the abolition of slavery.
Yes.
So they would have had nothing to do with it.
And how do we know that? We don't know that. So what you are doing is you are taking one understanding of a situation.
So you're believing the historians that suit your narrative?
It's not what I believe, Piers. Let's be clear about this. We're having a debate. And that's what is important about
this. It's not, Paula.
It's to be able to have a debate about something that happened in history.
We shouldn't be looking at pictures, little pictures of ships on a footballer's crest badge. Who cares? Well, it's got nothing to do with it.
Well, clearly, I'm sure the players at Manchester City and Manchester United, those who advocate show racism the red card.
No, here's what's going to happen.
They will care
no,
about
here's
it.
what's going to happen. The Guardian, which has just been caught with its racism trousers down, right, because it turned out they were founded by a bunch of slave owners, right? So they're the last people on earth to be lecturing about this.
Is that right? Aren't they the right people?
No,
actually,
they're not. They're not. Because I found their hand wringing over that utterly ridiculous. I'll tell you why.
Well, they've apologised.
Every single family in Britain, if you go back far enough, you'll have people in their past, hundreds of years ago, who employed slaves, almost certainly.
And therefore?
And therefore, we know that was wrong then. Why should everybody today who had nothing to do with it think it was all terrible spend their entire time apologising for it?
It's about education,
yes.
First of all, just education. And the second thing it's about, and you know this, we always rewrite history. We rewrote World War II because we found out about Bletchley. A person who grew up in the 50s would have a different World War II than a kid now because we found out about Bletchley. So we are getting more intelligent. And that's one thing that's happening. And I mean,
Bonnie, you can't be serious.
Hang on. And the other thing, the United Kingdom was actually on the side of the Confederacy during the Civil War, and in fact was going to send a ship to the Confederacy to fight for it when it was stopped and warned by Lincoln and paid an indemnity to the United States.
Who is going to pay me
Yes.
and my family reparations for what the Vikings did to us?
Well, I think you should seek it out.
Who's going to?
Explore
Who's
it.
going to seek it out?
So literally, so we go back over every invasion, every bad thing. Hang on, let me finish.
It is the
Let's try and have a conversation.
Denial.
No,
it's the ideology of denial.
I'm not denying anything happened.
So then let's deal
with
it.
No, what I'm saying is once you start this woke rampage, there is no end. A bit like the statues of historical figures. They're all... Guess what? Hang on, let me finish. Ladies, give me a moment. All historical figures are flawed. You can find flaws in Mandela, in Gandhi and Churchill. It's why they had to be boarded up, their statues at Parliament Square, so the mob didn't attack them. But if we take this route, everything, all the time, we have to be apologising, paying for... Why? How does that move us on?
What's wrong with an apology? Nothing is wrong with that. If you...
I'm very sorry that hundreds of years ago people behaved badly.
It's not anything to do with hundreds of years. We acknowledge it. We always do that. That is what history
Why
does.
should footballers have to remove crests that contain images of ships, which, according to many historians, were adopted as an emblem 35 years after slavery was abolished?
Well, it was abolished, but it wasn't over. Okay, and that's
so
the point.
Are all ships racist?
Well, no, we don't know that, but we need to investigate.
Are all ships racist?
We need to investigate it. Why not? What's wrong with that?
All ships could be racist.
Why are you going to make a generalization about it?
You see how ridiculous this sounds?
That's a ridiculous point, and you are.
All right.
You are.
So you think
and
we should...
I think the Irish should talk to the Norwegians.
No, honestly...
I think the Irish should talk to...
And also, the Italians and the Romans.
Why
Wow.
Why not? Why not?
What's going to happen about the Romans?
Why not?
I need reparations for what Rome did to us.
I think the Irish should talk to the Icelanders.
It's
because
preposterous,
it was a slave.
Bonnie.
No, it's not preposterous. It's good dialogue.
No, you know what it is? Here's what it is. It's exhausting.
Well, that's different.
Honestly, this woke mentality is so exhausting. I feel myself literally getting tired as I listen to it.
Tired. Try being a black female.
You shouldn't.
I am sure being a black female can be wonderful. I can have its challenges.
We don't need to have this kind of
Trust
argument.
me, walking around being me ain't no bed of roses
either. If you're
either.
talking about being exhausted, it's the exhaustion of the pursuit of knowledge.
Let me bring in our very patient third guest from across the pond, Hotep Jesus. Hotep, you've been listening to this. I'm under attack here.
Nah, no.
All right. Hotep, my general point is this. I think slavery was horrific. I think if you basically chart back from almost any family in Britain and America, you'll find some evidence somewhere that someone in the family probably was employed in using slavery when it was going on. But I just don't understand the point of this constant series now of recriminations, reparations, apologies, guilt trips, and so on. I don't know what point it serves.
I worked at a tech company once, and we know how rife they are with leftism. And in casual conversation in the office, I said, I want to be a national master in chess one day. And this white girl said to me, she said, don't you feel offended that they used the term master in the title? And I just looked at her like, that thought never crossed my mind. The same thing if I were to go to the harbor and I would see a ship, I would not think of slavery.
Right.
There's a huge fascination with slavery amongst Black people where our educational system, our upbringing has tied us to this travesty in human history and made us want to identify with it instead of identifying with richer parts of our history. Now, here's the issue that this comes down to. Women are going to see the world, frankly, different from men. Women are very emotional. So, of course, they're going to be worried about, you know, what's on the badge and all this stuff. When we look at the UK, right? The UK has about 4 million starving children right now. And that doubled since the past 2 years.
My brother, hotel.
Do you think that children that are hungry care about some badges? They can't eat football badges.
Brother, hotel.
You know, what leftism does is they try to sidestep the real dilemmas and worry about all of these frills on the outside, on the exterior.
Well, you know what, Hotep? Let me
not getting
just,
to the root of the
Hotep,
problem.
apart from saying that you've made two really good friends here with your women get too emotional.
One from the south side of Chicago. Really impressed,
and
brother.
I'll let you three deal with that after the show. But
Really impressed.
I've got two things to say to what you just said. One is there was a genuine debate in Australia several years ago because an academic went on the airwaves and claimed that chess, which you just talked about, was racist because the white pieces went first, right? And I remember thinking at the time, the only time anyone in the world would think that that was the case was if some academic decided to pop his head up and go, it's racist. Nobody actually believes chess is racist for that reason. And secondly, on your second point about current things, I read today that there are between 7 and 8 million slaves in India alone at the moment, now.
Correct.
Now, if the Guardian newspaper wants to launch a campaign against slavery in India, I'm all in. I'm all in for any current slavery going on anywhere in the world. I will join that campaign. But going back several hundred years to a spurious argument, which turns out may not even be historically correct, about badges on football players where they show ships, therefore all ships are racist and therefore they must be removed, to me is preposterous.
Well, they do the same thing here in America. They wanted to remove Aunt Jemima from product packaging. They want to tear down statues. They're tearing down Lee, Robert E. Lee, I believe his name was, famous
family
general.
wants that to happen, brother.
A whole bunch of people are involved in what Jay-Z has a quote. It goes, moral victories are for minor league coaches. When you really want to get into the nitty gritty of things, you look at more important issues than just badges on a football uniform. I just don't get it.
Do you know something? You just used the phrase nitty gritty. That itself has been banned now.
No.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yes, it has.
No, it hasn't.
No,
banned it?
I have
Banned
seen
it.
people say that is a racist term.
Yeah, well,
and historians
Listen,
have told them that they're wrong.
I'm sitting
Right,
here.
so
I'm
you accept
sitting
that
here.
these historians who pop their head up saying all this stuff can be completely wrong.
researched.
First of all, I want to
Debated.
get your collective reaction to the suggestion that this is really a female thing.
That's-
That you women are a little over-emotional
That
about
is-
badges.
I've never heard a man say that for a long time.
Right.
So that's
I think that's
an hour.
Well, in the interest of fair play, what is your response to
And I would have
Hotep?
liked to ask him what he thought about the American football clubs who have changed their names because they referenced various members of society who didn't think that it was appropriate that they should be called those names. We have rugby clubs who have changed their names because they didn't think that it was an appropriate.
But we're not
thing to
talking
call
about
them.
we're
So
not
when we
talking
look
about
at-
potentially inappropriate or inflammatory names
So-
which have evolved over years. We're talking about
But it also went with the
images
emblem.
of boats.
It also went with the
They're
emblem.
boats.
Well, I know
We-
what
we-
they are, but it's what they
can I
represent.
just say-
Piers.
Yeah, Hotep, come in.
Yeah, please, Hotel.
Yeah, because she wanted to know my opinion on, I
It's
believe
Paula.
it's
It's
the
Paula,
Washington
by the way.
Commanders now.
No, we have names, brother.
I'm sorry.
We have names,
say that again.
brother.
Who's the sister that
My name is
addressed me
Bonnie.
about the
This
football?
is Paula.
We're sisters
now we're
now.
sisters. That's so nice. Thank you. Proceed.
Sister Paula?
Proceed.
It's Bonnie.
Okay.
It's Bonnie and Paula.
From the
okay.
south side of Chicago.
Love y'all. Great
Okay,
energy.
brother, keep
and I'm
going.
on your side. And I'm on your side. But when I see a football
What
team
side is
change its
that?
names
Yeah.
to Commanders, you know, I'm like, what is that?
Are you insulted?
It's a
Do you feel
joke to me.
insulted? Do you feel insulted?
Well, Commander is
No,
surely.
no, I don't
surely
feel
Commander
insulted.
is also,
Do you feel shaken up?
But surely here's the point.
No,
Hotep,
it just
Hotep, isn't the word commander itself? It doesn't that suggest white supremacy because most commanders around that time were white.
And you're
so
named
you change
after,
it to something that
you're
also
na-
is racist.
and
There
you're
is no
named-
word you can
and
use.
you're named after an Egyptian pharaoh. So give us. Are you offended by all of this or what?
I'm not offended. Why would that's the whole thing? People are offended by the name of the team.
By people wanting,
I'm not offended.
You're offended
no, I'm not
by
offended.
people. Listen, you're offended by people who want to actually pursue an injustice from the past. It's not a strange thing. It's not unusual. It is not
No, I'm
unusual
not.
thing
No,
you
you can't conflate those two things.
Oh, I'm doing it.
I am. I am for that.
Okay, let
I am
Hotep
for that.
respond.
Yes, sir.
No. What she said is just inaccurate. She tried to conflate two things. She tried to say I didn't care about the travesties and conflate that with something about the football team is going to change that.
Right.
No, I agree with you. There are real issues that need to be dealt with. Changing the football team is basically not tackling the problem.
Exactly
You're ignoring
right.
it. It's a way to waste time. It's a way to waste a budget.
If we admit to, and this is in psychoanalysis, that there is such a thing as generational trauma, okay, it does exist. It does exist in families, and it can exist in a people. Now, I'm not going to go all the way and say, do this, tear statues down, because I don't think taking a statue down solves anything.
You're going to go after the badges on football.
No, I'm not going to go after badges.
We're going after the debate.
But the
Piers.
debate
We're going
is
after the
okay.
debate.
There is no debate.
There is a debate.
Listen.
But this goes back to the gender conversation.
Everyone hold their horses. If that isn't a racist term. I don't know. Maybe horses get offended.
Well, if you keep saying it might be.
Here's my point, Paula. Everybody is offended by everything. And so once you assume that we have to start feeling guilty for our past, there is no end to it.
I think the Irish should go after the Icelanders.
That's a very emotional term
because
to
the
use
Irish were
in a
enslaved
debate.
by Iceland. I think they should do it.
It's a
Why
very
not?
emotional term to use in a debate.
All right. What I would love to do is have a campaign to close down The Guardian. I think that would be hugely popular. I think because of their outlandish links to the slave trade, The Guardian should fall on their own virtue-signaling swords and close themselves down as a matter of... They should cancel themselves. So if you're watching Guardian journalists, I know you probably are, I'm your guilty pleasure. If you're watching, cancel yourselves tonight.
And they'll do what you say.
It's the right thing to do. You are tarnished by your slavery background, and you must end the Guardian newspaper as a matter of urgency in the national interest, and then you can all run off and feel guilty for the rest of your lives about the shame you have
and
wrought
they'll do what you say.
on everybody.
And when you're writing out your cheque, Piers, I'll remind you how to spell my name.
I know how to spell your name, Paula. I know how to spell your name.
He writes a check to you.
But I'm first of all waiting for my check from the Romans and the Vikings, which I will be aggressively pursuing.
Get it going.
Lovely to see you both. A spirited debate as always. And Hotep, thank you very much indeed over in America. Probably quite a good thing for you. You are several thousand miles away from these two because
you're good.
They're beginning to steam over. I think you got them with the emotion line. Thank you both, all three of you, very much indeed.